I'm really curious, though, because we've seen this massive elite freakout about what Trump is doing here and about globalization. I've just been sent a story here that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, is about to announce that globalization is basically over, the era is over, because people don't see the benefits. So is this an interesting sort of data point that Donald Trump may offend the sort of the chattering classes, as we call them down here, and yet he is on the money with where most people are when it comes to saying, you know what, that slightly cheaper television is great, but I'd rather have the job and the dignity.
I think so, yeah. It's a fundamental turning point. It's big of a turning point. If you look at some of the big changes in America, the Reagan reforms, which took place in the early 1980s, or the advent of technology, sort of a computer on every desk that happened in the early 1990s, the commercialization of the internet in the early 2000s. I think we're at that point. And you're right, politically, Starmer, it's great he's coming around. His party, of course, isn't coming around because all of Europe, Western Europe, not Hungary, but a lot of it. First of all, they don't let people decide who are going to vote for. I mean, go try and vote for Marine Le Pen. You can't do that. Try and vote for having controlled borders. That's politically incorrect. It's non-woke, and the elite won't have you do it. So it's great that Steinmeier said that. Maybe he's gotten some religion, but I'll have to see it to believe it.
Now, Christian, I want to ask you about free speech. J.D. Vance has made a big thing about that as regards particularly Britain. And he's mentioned before with NATO that it's a key thing, that America doesn't see why it should defend other nations if they don't share the same values. Here in Australia, we're embarking on some pretty severe restrictions on free speech on both sides of politics. Now, you mentioned our 10% tariff. That's actually our GST, our consumption tax, our VAT. That applies to everything across the board, so we can't withdraw it from American goods. So what can we trade with America to get rid of those 10% tariffs? Should we be looking at restoring free speech, for example?
Well, I think certainly that would be helpful. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see if Trump. He said that Vietnam had offered something and it was going to be a big deal. They face very high tariffs as of April 2nd, and so do those come down? Does any country get out of the 10% tariff, or is that just something that everyone faces? We don't know. I think it's important to differentiate Australia. During COVID, I think a lot of Americans noticed that lockdowns, varied across the United States from severe to less severe, and we're a little surprised that Australia seemed pretty severe under what was nominally a liberal government. But, contrast that to Western Europe. I think people would see that the United States has a lot more in common values-wise with Australia. I know you have an election coming up, so it'll be interesting to see how that happens. But when you look at the terminal decay of Western Europe and in NATO and things like that, I think the Pacific is a different story. And people think of it economically as the future. It's where the biggest threats come from, China, but also the biggest economic opportunities for growth. And also, you were talking earlier on the program about net zero, just being a great producer of coal and iron ore and other minerals. The fact that I think Australia, probably easier than Germany, Britain, France, can dispense with that sort of nonsense, that sort of civic religion of climate change alarmism, could endear the country to a lot of people.